Does President Trump believe that President Obama should go to jail for something?
Look, the president believes that this matter needs to be thoroughly investigated, and anyone convicted of crime should be held accountable in this country. Go ahead.
You never seen it?
No.
He gets a glass of Flint tap water, and I swear to God, he drinks it like this. Flushes.
Can I get some water? I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt.
Usually when something isn't a stunt, you have to say
It's
that.
100% a stunt. When was the last time a president stopped a speech to ask, can I get a glass of water? They would never do that. They would have water ready for him.
He used to be seen as the face of modern leadership, but Joe Rogan and Karoline Leavitt just ripped that image apart and set it on fire. Barack Obama's legacy, once covered in praise and applause, didn't stand much of a chance as they went straight at it with sharp focus. No gentle criticism here. This was a direct hit on everything the media usually avoids. And when the dust settles, what remains isn't hype or show. It's a raw message echoing louder than any line Obama ever read from a teleprompter.
President Trump never had anything to do with Russia, and the Russia collusion hoax was a massive fraud perpetuated on the American people from the very beginning. And the worst part of this is Obama knew that truth, and so did all of the other corrupt officials involved in this scam, including former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James
Joan Rivers said that Michelle Obama was a man before she died.
Was that a joke? I thought it was a joke.
I thought it was a joke too, but the way she said it wasn't like jokey. She was like, oh, come on, everybody knows Michelle Obama's the man. Like, remember that?
Yeah, like, would Big Mike for that?
Well, I think Barack Obama, known for always looking in control while getting very little done, is back under pressure. And this time, the heat is coming from Joe Rogan and Karoline Leavitt. Together, they're putting a bright spotlight on what they see as empty showmanship dressed up as leadership. If running a country were judged like a UFC fight, Obama might have been down before his second term even began. But with the media cheering him on and a Nobel Prize handed to him early on, he moved through 8 years like a smooth-talking figure with perfect lighting.
On another matter, over the past few days, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has unveiled shocking new evidence that former President Barack Obama and top aides in the Obama administration conspired to subvert President Trump's 2016 election victory and undermine the democratic will of the American people.
Joe Rogan didn't even have to dig that deep. Obama's presidency almost tells its own story. It felt like an overproduced Netflix special. Lots of hype, not much impact, and mostly praised by people who thought hope and change meant a nicer-looking PowerPoint. The leader who promised total transparency somehow made duct tape look clear. From the Fast and Furious scandal to the NSA surveillance mess, his administration seemed to turn yes we can into no, you don't get to know.
Give me some volume and go full screen.
What you know now, do you wish you had a third term? You know what, if I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony, I'd be fine with that.
We know he wasn't really running the country.
Yeah.
We used to think he was actually running the country, and now they're like, no, he didn't even see those executive orders. That was all auto-pen.
Karoline Leavitt, with sharp Gen Z instincts, didn't need a decade of glowing headlines to question the image. While legacy media was still focused on Obama's polished appearance and cinematic moments at the White House, she was taking a closer look at what she saw as political theater. In her view, his time in office felt like a viral Instagram persona, perfectly curated, photogenic, but lacking substance underneath the surface.
And I would just like to point out that the judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. That is an egregious abuse of the bench. This judge does not have that authority. It is the opinion of this White House and of this administration, and that's why we're fighting this in court. And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority. Under the Alien Enemies Act, the president has this power, and that's why this deportation campaign has continued.
Let's not overstate it. Obama didn't walk into an easy situation. But the recovery that followed wasn't the economic triumph it was often made out to be either. He inherited a financial crisis, and the rebound that came after was slow and uneven. Critics pointed to George W. Bush for the damage, while supporters credited job growth and stabilization during his years in office. Still, Many felt the recovery lacked momentum and took far too long to fully take hold. Meanwhile, the national debt kept rising, and Joe Biden's long career continued producing its share of headline-grabbing moments and awkward sound bites.
It's fun because things are actually happening. Very different than most of the time when people get elected.
And I will shut down the federal Department of Education, and we will move everything back to the state.
Most of the time when people get elected, they claim all these things when they're running for president. Then they get into office and not much changes.
Individualize education and do it with the love for their children.
And in fact, a lot of what they campaigned on, they don't practice at all. Great example is the Obama administration. The Hope and Change website had to be changed because there was a bunch of stuff in there about whistleblowers.
I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot. I called for a thorough review of our surveillance operations before Mr. Snowden made these leaks. My preference would have been for a lawful, orderly examination of these laws.
Protecting whistleblowers, which they didn't do at all. It was one of the worst administrations.
Rogan's point, as he framed it, was that Obama had a way of turning crises into powerful speeches, while criticism of actual outcomes often followed. He argued that the messaging sometimes felt more polished than the results on the ground. From that perspective, critics point to foreign policy decisions like Libya and Syria as major failures, with the red line moment in Syria often cited as a sign of inconsistency in enforcement. The use of drone strikes during his presidency also drew heavy debate, with supporters calling them necessary counterterrorism tools and opponents raising serious concerns about civilian casualties and transparency. On domestic issues, especially race relations, Obama is viewed very differently depending on who you ask. Supporters say he helped bring attention to long-standing issues in a careful, unifying way, while critics argue that tensions sometimes deepened during his tenure. By the end of his presidency, Obama's legacy remained sharply divided, seen by some as steady leadership in difficult times and by others as style-heavy rhetoric paired with mixed results.
It's so interesting when you play people clips of Obama talking about the importance of securing the border.
I like to play those clips.
And
sounds just like Trump.
Play the statistics of how many people they sent back and telling people to not come over with their children, that they'll be separated from their children. It's one of those things where people don't like that. They don't like to see that. It really is deeply disturbing to them that Obama campaigned on this idea of protecting our border
because we all used to agree on it.
Yeah, but it became a racial issue with Trump.
Under Obama, critics argued that the IRS was overly aggressive towards certain political groups, especially Tea Party organizations, which led to accusations of unfair targeting, while other security concerns were seen as less of a priority. The Benghazi attack also became a major political controversy, with debates over how the situation was handled and how it was explained publicly, including early messaging that was later questioned and revised. Accountability during this period was heavily disputed, depending on political perspective. Joe Rogan, in his commentary, has often highlighted what he sees as gaps between political messaging and real-world outcomes. The rollout of the Affordable Care Act website, for example, was widely criticized at the time for technical failures and delays, even as the policy itself remained a major legislative achievement. Media coverage during Obama's presidency also drew criticism from opponents, who felt it was often overly favorable. Supporters, however, viewed much of the coverage as recognition of a historic presidency and a moment of cultural significance. At the same time, broader debates over surveillance, whistleblowers, and press freedom continued under multiple administrations, including Obama's, adding to ongoing national disagreements about transparency and security.
60% of the injunctions by partisan activists in the judicial branch have come against President Donald Trump, and 92% of those have been from Democrat-appointed judges. This is a clear, concerted effort by leftists who don't like this president and are trying to impose or slow down his agenda.
Karoline Leavitt sharply criticized what she sees as the overly idealized image that surrounded Obama's presidency. In that view, Obama wasn't just a political leader, but also a highly polished public figure, presented almost like a brand, with strong visuals, media appeal, and a loyal base driven as much by emotion as by policy details. Supporters often pointed to his calm speaking style, carefully delivered speeches, and ability to connect on a cultural level. Critics, however, argue that this emphasis on image sometimes overshadowed deeper policy debates. During his time in office, the country still faced major challenges, including economic pressures and social shifts that affected different regions in very different ways. some felt those issues were not always fully addressed, while others credit his administration with steady leadership during difficult periods. Overall, his presidency is often described in sharply different ways, by some as inspiring and modern, and by others as heavily focused on messaging and public perception.
If you all recall, just flashback to 2016 and the years after, the entire Trump 1 presidency was embroiled in this scandal that was perpetuated by the Democrat Party. And you had major Democrat Party officials in this city, namely Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, who went on television and told the American people, Donald Trump is an asset of Russia.
Obama's relationship with Silicon Valley is often described as unusually close, with critics arguing that major tech companies gained significant influence during his presidency. Companies like Google and Facebook expanded rapidly in that era, raising ongoing debates about data privacy, regulation, and the long-term power of big tech in everyday life. Supporters of the administration point out that this was also a period of rapid technological growth and innovation, while critics argue that regulation didn't keep pace with the industry's expansion, especially around user data and surveillance concerns. On governance, Obama relied heavily on executive action at times, particularly when Congress was gridlocked. Supporters saw this as pragmatic leadership in a divided political system, while critics viewed it as executive overreach. His administration also oversaw the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, including bank bailouts and recovery measures. Those actions remain heavily debated. Some argue they stabilized the economy, while others believe the recovery favored large financial institutions over ordinary Americans. Overall, his legacy in these areas is still widely contested, shaped by very different interpretations of how power, policy, and accountability were handled during his time in office.
Obama, during this Kamala Harris administration, it changed my opinion of that guy.
I don't understand how we got so toxic, so divided, and so bitter.
He said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that.
Did you have a high opinion of him before?
Yeah, I did just as an intelligent person, a statesman. He's probably caught up in the system. It's very difficult to make real meaningful change. You think you're going to do something and then you get into office and you're like, oh God, what a quagmire this place is. But watching him just straight up lie about Trump.
The childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd size.
Joe Rogan, in his commentary, argued that Obama often turned major national issues into highly polished moments of public messaging rather than visible long-term fixes. One example critics point to is Flint, Michigan, where Obama's visit and symbolic gestures were widely covered, but questions remained about how much direct impact followed at the ground level. Karoline Leavitt has also echoed the view that there's a gap between political imagery and real-world outcomes, highlighting moments like the continued existence of Guantanamo Bay despite Obama's early promise to close it. That pledge became one of the more cited examples of unfinished policy goals from his presidency. Supporters, however, argue that governing constraints, especially congressional opposition, played a major role in what could realistically be accomplished. Critics counter that these limitations don't fully explain the difference between campaign promises and final outcomes. From this perspective, Obama's presidency is often seen as highly media-savvy and image-conscious, with strong public communication, but mixed results depending on the policy area being discussed. In contrast, defenders of his legacy emphasize economic recovery after the 2008 crisis, healthcare reform, and a generally stable international position during turbulent years. As a result, his time in office continues to be interpreted in sharply different ways, either as effective leadership under constraint or as a presidency that leaned heavily on messaging while leaving key promises unresolved.
Did you take any comfort from knowing that Obama, when he was running for office and in his Hope and Change website, he had provisions to protect whistleblowers and provisions to to reward people, right? I mean, do you remember all that? I mean, it was eventually redacted, or he eventually deleted it from the website.
But that disappeared it from the website.
Yes, but that was a big part of his program, or what he was running on, was that when people were exposing unlawful activity, he was going to protect those people. Did you take any comfort in that?
Obama also campaigned. Well, Obama also, during his campaign, said he campaigned actively against the warrantless wiretapping the Bush.
Joe Rogan's commentary, as framed by critics, suggests that Obama's presidency was more about presentation and messaging than sweeping transformation. From that perspective, it's often described as a highly produced political show, with strong media coordination, disciplined communication, and a heavy reliance on optics. That view also extends into his post-presidency years. Obama's work after leaving office, including book deals, media projects, and paid speaking engagements, has been widely successful, which supporters see as a natural continuation of a global public figure's career, while critics view it as evidence of heavy personal branding after political office. Supporters point out that former presidents commonly take on media and speaking roles, while critics argue the scale of modern political celebrity has grown significantly in recent years. During and after his presidency, broader issues like inflation trends, cultural debates, and political polarization have continued to evolve under multiple administrations, making it difficult to attribute them to any single leader. Obama's personal life and retirement, including time spent in places like Martha's Vineyard, is often highlighted in media coverage, reflecting his continued status as a high-profile public figure. Depending on perspective, this is seen either as a well-earned private life after public service, or as a symbol of political and cultural disconnect. Overall, his legacy and his post-presidency image remains highly debated, shaped as much by perception and media framing as by policy outcomes.
While publicly pretending to engage in a peaceful transfer of power, in private, former President Obama went to great and nefarious lengths to try to sow discord among the public and sabotage his successor, President Trump. The new evidence released by the Director of National Intelligence, who is here with me today, confirms that the Obama administration manufactured politicized intelligence, which was later used as the justification for baseless smears against President Trump.
During and after Obama's presidency, the country continued to face deep divisions, including rising political polarization and ongoing debates about race, identity, and trust in institutions. Supporters argue these issues are long-standing and not the result of a single administration, while critics believe they worsened during this period. Obama often responded to national moments with public speeches and messaging focused on unity and reflection, which some saw as thoughtful leadership and others saw as insufficient compared to the scale of the problems. Joe Rogan, in his commentary, has suggested that modern political leadership can sometimes lean heavily on image and communication rather than tangible results. Critics of Obama's record often frame his presidency in that light, while supporters point to economic recovery, healthcare reform, and international stability efforts as meaningful achievements. Wages, social mobility, and political trust remain major challenges in the U.S. across multiple administrations, making it difficult to attribute these trends to any one leader alone. Today, Obama's legacy continues to be a central reference point in American politics, admired by many, criticized by others, and still heavily used as a benchmark in debates about what effective leadership looks like.